Hello, today's poem we're examining is Whoso List to Hunt, I Know Where Is and Hind by Sir Thomas Wyatt. Before we start, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so because it helps us greatly. It's really appreciated and it helps us continue to make this content. I have the poem here, so let's start. Whoso list to hunt, I know where is an hind, but as for me, alas, I may no more. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore, I am of them that farthest cometh behind, yet may I by no means my wearied mind draw from the deer, but as she fleeth afore, fainting I follow. I leave off, therefore, sithens in a net I seek to hold the wind. Who list her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain, and craven with diamonds in letters plain. There is written her fair neck round about, Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. A really powerful poem by Sir Thomas Wyatt, which is interesting, intriguing from many points of view, particularly historically, and also from the point of view of literature. So, multi-layered, plenty to unpack, so let's start. It is generally thought that this sonnet by Sir Thomas Wyatt relates to his relationship with Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII of England. Wyatt and Boleyn were lovers before her marriage to King Henry, and in this regard it's reasonable to suppose that both poet and speaker are the same. Wyatt uses an extended metaphor comparing love to a hunt, in which the male is a hunter and the female a deer, a hind he cannot catch. The poem portrays the hunt as exhilarating yet violent and prone to failure, as the prey often escapes. The title suggests that Wyatt is writing the poem to warn those who would want to engage in love to be wary. Indeed, the speaker in the poem says he will not hunt again. Alas, meaning alas, I may no more. The pursuit of Anne has wearied, exhausted him so much that he is now behind the other hunters in the chase for love. And yet, he says, he cannot stop his wearied mind from thinking of women, and Anne in particular, and, almost fainting, carries on the chase regardless. Deer is itself a pun, a play upon dear, meaning something precious. He tells us that trying to catch Anne is like trying to catch the wind in a net, an impossible and foolish endeavour. His advice to other would-be lovers is not to spend his time in vain like he has. The deer belongs to Caesar, symbolising Henry. We are told that the deer carries around her neck a diamond necklace on which is engraved Noli me tangere, don't touch me, for I belong to Caesar. Anne, like the king's deer, is off limits, and there for the king only. In the final line, we are told that the thought of Anne being no longer available to continue their affair is driving him wild. although to those around him he has to pretend he is calm, tame, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. As well as a fine poem, it is one of the first sonnets written in English. The sonnet began as a form of popular song, sung in medieval Italian taverns and at festivals. Through the poet Francesco Petrarch, it became one of the most popular and prestigious forms of poetry in Europe. Wyatt introduced it to our language in the 1530s and 1540s by translating and imitating Petrarch's sonnets. Whoso List to Hunt is a rewriting of Petrarch 190. Eventually, English poets, including Shakespeare, would adapt the Italian sonnet for their poems. Written in the first person voice, Wyatt's poem is a personal account of the speaker's loss as his love is no longer returned by his former lover. Anne must flee Wyatt's advances or be killed, literally and metaphorically, because if her infidelity were discovered, King Henry would execute them both. The poem demonstrates the vulnerability of women who are seen as the prey and the hunted and the objects of desire. Here they are also represented as the property of the male. Wyatt draws or alludes to the writing of the Roman author Solinus, who records that white stags were the property of the emperor Caesar and had inscribed on their collars the warning, "Do not touch me, I am Caesar's." Wyatt, a learned and gifted courtier, travelled Europe, later in the employment of King Henry, and encountered the sonnet in Italy and France and used it for his poems. As a courtier, Wyatt would have been in the company of Henry and Anne, but had to pretend to be indifferent to her. This pretense, or feint, forms the pun on line 7, fainting I follow. Wyatt compares Anne to the goddess Diana, Artemis in Greek legend. Diana was chaste, a virgin and pure. The comparison is apt because he associates Anne, through allusion to Greek myth, to someone associated with refusal and resistance to continue their physical love. The necklace his former lover wears symbolises the wealth she has acquired through marriage to the king. But the tag reminds us that it is more a collar, a symbol of her servitude to him. She wears a "do not touch" label, which stresses that now she is his property. This contrasts strongly when earlier in the poem Anne is compared to the wind, strong and free, escaping capture. She was once a free spirit, but is now, in many ways, a prisoner. End-stopping the first 4 lines makes the poem measured and gives the impression that the speaker's advice to others pursuing love is based on long reflection and bitter experience. The use of a series of rhyming couplets makes his advice memorable. Yet lines 5 and 6, which employ enjambment, run-on lines, imply the speaker, despite what he says about giving up on love, finds it impossible not to lust for his former lover. The word wild at the end of the poem stresses his continuing passion for her, and is ironic in that he, the hunter, is the wild one, rather than the hind who has been tamed by her marriage to Henry. Let's now look at the form and structure of the poem. Wyatt closely follows Petrarchan's sonnet form, an initial 8 lines called the octave and a final 6 lines called the sestet. Traditionally, the first 8 lines lay out an argument or a scenario. The final 6 lines complicate that argument or add nuance to the scenario. The pivot between the octave and the sestet, the poem's turning point, is called the volta or the turn. It's the place where the poem begins to address the issues the octave has raised. Wyatt's poem follows this formula. The first 8 lines of the poem lay out a scenario. The speaker is a hunter who has been pursuing a single deer with obsessive energy. He's giving up the chase though, because the deer is too quick for him to catch. The final 6 lines complicate that scenario, explaining why he can't catch the deer. She already belongs to another man, a powerful person. Lines 9 and 10 provide a sort of volta, reiterating the poem's first line, although it is not as prominent as those we find later in Shakespeare's sonnets. Employing a formal poetic structure as the sonnet lends a gravity and formality to the poem and stresses the importance of its themes. Wyatt writes in iambic pentameter. For example, "Whoso list to hunt, I know where is an hind. But as for me, alas, I may no more." Using iambic pentameter mimics the rhythm of English speech and gives the poem a realistic conversational quality. Sir Thomas Wyatt lived in the early part of the 16th century in England, a time of considerable political turmoil. In 1532, King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church as England took its first steps to becoming a Protestant country. Henry broke away from Rome so that he could divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn, reportedly already pregnant to him. Henry desperately sought a male heir who would continue the Tudor dynasty. Alas, as Wyatt might say, his marriage to Anne lasted only 3 years. She was executed in 1536 on the grounds of adultery. During the fallout, Wyatt was accused of being one of the several men implicated in Anne's infidelities, and it was only through his powerful political connections, home and abroad, that he rode this political storm. Also, there is nothing to suggest that Anne and Wyatt had resumed their relationship, as this sonnet demonstrates. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If so, please hit the like button and also ring the bell. If you haven't done so already, it would be fantastic if you would subscribe. It costs nothing and it means that we can keep producing this content. If you haven't done so already, please check out our other videos on writing and analysis. Until next time, from Carol and me, write well.